So today in class we introduced ourselves to what closed reading looks like. Closed reading is essentially a way for you to really go through and analyze the text, pulling out important information so that by the time you finish, you really have the best possible chance of answering any questions about the text correctly. Now, with this particular selection, we don't have any questions that we're necessarily going to be answering. So this is more of a dry kind of closed reading session. What we're doing is we're looking for the central idea of the selection as a whole. In order to do that, we have to identify the central idea of each section within the selection. Now, when it comes to closed reading, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and just kind of briefly look at some of the things that jump out at me. First, I notice that the title of the piece, Langston Hughes, is simply a name. So that tells me it might have something to do with that particular person. We have some subheadings throughout the piece, such as Early Life is the first subheading in the section. And then we've got Growing Success. If I continue on, we've got A Continuing Life of Letters and Death and Legacy. These different section subheadings let me know that this piece is most likely going to be about this person's life. Even if I don't know who Langston Hughes is right off the bat, chances are this is going to be a story about his life based off of what each subheading described. So I'm going to go next to the title, and I'm going to make a prediction saying what I think this whole selection is going to be about. This is an opportunity for me to really start thinking about the text, thinking about what the story is going to say. I'm not just trying to rush through. I'm starting to work with everything closely to make sure that I get a good understanding of what's happening. Next, I'm going to go through and I'm going to read the selection one time. Now, to kind of make things go faster, I'm not going to read it at this point. We're going to pretend like I've already read through it once. I've not done any kind of markings or anything like that. And now's my second chance through the selection. So at this point, I'm going to break out my trusty highlighter. And with the highlighter, I'm not going to go highlighter happy. I'm not going to just highlight anything that, I want, I'm not going to highlight everything on the page. I'm going to highlight stuff that I think is important. So here, I've got this section called Early Life. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to look at some of the stuff that I know jumped out at me as I read the first time. For example, I can put that he was born February 1st in Joplin, Missouri. This is important to me because this is the day of his birth. So if I'm looking at, if I'm reading a story about someone's life, the day they're born is going to be important information to remember. Something else I'm going to highlight is the fact that he was raised primarily by his maternal grandmother, Mary. This lets me know that something was going on with mom and dad. It does tell me that they separated and lived in different places, but I want to focus on the fact that he was raised primarily by his maternal grandmother because that's really important information. It's letting me know that that's who is really in charge of his upbringing as he's growing up. When she passes away, he goes to live with his mother. And then it says that at this time, he's going to first begin to write poetry. Now, because I've already read the selection through one time, I know that it talks a lot about Hughes and his writing. So I know that this information is important because since he's a writer, when he first starts to write poetry, it's going to be something that I need to know. It also says that one of his teachers introduced him to two different poets and that they would later be people that he cited as primary influences, the ones that he most wanted to be like. Then it goes on to talk about the fact that he contributed to his school's literary magazine. So here he's continuing to put out there the type of writing, or put out there the fact that he wants to be a writer and trying with different styles. It continues in the next paragraph to talk about the fact that his first poem was published in a magazine and highly praised. It continues on to say that he became a part of Harlem's burgeoning cultural movement, and that movement was called the Harlem Renaissance. So again, this is showing us vital parts that he played throughout his life. And then it says that he goes to live in Paris, where he continues to develop and publish his poetry. So all of this is important information that helps us get a basic understanding of what the beginning of his career looked like. Now, if I were to go back and if I were to just look at the parts that I highlighted throughout the selection, it would give me a brief summary of that selection. James Mercer Langston Hughes was born February 1st in Joplin, Missouri. He was raised by his maternal grandmother. He began to write poetry, and one of his teachers introduced him to Carl Sandburg and Walt Whitman. He was a contributor to his school's literary magazine. His poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, was published and highly praised. He became a part of Harlem's cultural movement, the Harlem Renaissance, and he lived in Paris for a little bit, where he continued to develop and publish his poetry. So up where it says early life, I'm going to write just one simple sentence that essentially summarizes everything that I've highlighted. And I could say something like, Hughes began writing at an early age and continued after graduating. So that's an example of a central idea from this part of the selection, talking about the fact that he's writing at an early age and he's continuing to write even after graduation. Now, I can go through each individual section of this piece and highlight the major events or important information. And then next to each subheading, I will again go and write my sentence that explains to me what the overall central idea of that section is. So I have one here that I did earlier in the day, so you can see kind of how much highlighting has gone into it. Notice that I'm not highlighting every single sentence. Most of the time, I'm not even highlighting entire sentences. I'm just kind of highlighting the important information that jumps out at me and then summarizing next to each piece or next to each section what that particular section is about. This is going to really help us when it comes time to start answering questions about these selections, because then we'll be able to go back and find that information more easily because we've highlighted it, we've segregated it from the rest of the text. This is just a kind of brief overview of what closed reading looks like. We will continue this throughout the year and it will become more intense, but this is a great jumping off point for us. So if you missed the class or you just kind of want to review, this is a great video to kind of help spark that memory of what we discussed. And if you need any help, please let me know. Thanks and have a great day.